Phil Aston here from Now Spinning magazine with another classic album review. So this is going back in time, and I'm going to pick an album which means a great deal to me. I've been saying for a while, in fact someone said to me, why don't you do a beginner's guide to Deep Purple, considering I'm such a huge fan? And the reason why I haven't, a bit like the Montrose video, there are some albums that I'm so close to that I feel like the videos will just go on, or I have to make this definitive video that I can never go back to and touch up, or I can't revisit the album again. So I just don't go near it. And this is one of those albums in a way. So I was thinking, which Deep Purple album should I focus on first? And I was thinking, well, I've done Come Taste the Band, and I suppose what should I be next? And it could be
Made in Japan.
Made in Japan?
Yes.
Made in Japan it is. So this video is going to be put into two parts. I'm going to talk about my own personal review of the album. The internet has got all the stats and Wikipedia stuff about what chart positions he got into and what all the major reviewers of the time thought of it. I'm not going to talk about those. I'm going to talk about my experience with this album and what it means to me. And when I do the unboxing part of this album, I'm going to look at the original vinyl. This is mine from 1973, and the Super Deluxe box set, and the 3 CD box set, the 2 CD edition, the Japanese edition, the single edition, the 1999 remaster, and also the 2014 vinyl reissue as well. But I'll do all of that in part 2 of the video. So here it is, Made in Japan. So how did I first become aware of this? In the winter of 1972, as I sat down with my little tape recorder recording tracks off the radio onto my cassette deck, I heard a song called Never Before. It was obviously being released in 1972, but it didn't quite make it, and they were doing a program on Radio 1 about singles that didn't quite make the charts but should have done. And Never Before was one of these songs. And it was by Deep Purple, obviously. And I thought, I've heard, I was just getting into rock music, and I thought, oh God, I really like that. And so a friend of mine who was into rock music ahead of me, he was older than me at school, said, if you want to get into rock music, because I was into like T-Rex and Slade and stuff like that, he said, I'll lend you some stuff. And everything was on cassette in those days. Most kids at school didn't have record players, so you couldn't get access to your mum and dad's player, so we had tapes. And they hadn't been out long either. And he lent me Deep Purple's Machine Head on tape, Roxy Music, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Tarkus, I think it was. The Roxy Music album was For Your Pleasure, I think it was. And he told me what order to do. He said, start with ALP, then Roxy Music, then Deep Purple. And I think I spent about 30 seconds with Roxy Music. I like them now. I was a kid. It has to be immediate, doesn't it? And then ELP, where's the guitars? I was coming from Slade and T-Rex, so, I was looking for guitars, and there wasn't any. So then these are pre-recorded tapes. Now, Machine Head by Deep Purple, the tape was sequenced differently to the album. So the first 3 tracks that roll off the pre-recorded cassette tape of Machine Head were Highway Star, Smoke on the Water, Space Trucking. I was hooked. That was it. My life changed. It was amazing. However, again, so much is going on, and if you look on the Now Spinning website, you'll see that what actually happened was when I went to try and find Machine Head in the shops, because with my pocket money, no one had got one. So I bought In Rock instead, and there's a I might do a different video on that, but there's a post on the website all about how I found In Rock. Anyway, so that year, we're now rolling into 1973, was a voyage of discovery with me and Deep Purple. I'd heard Machine Head, I'd bought In Rock, and I'd go round to my friend's house after school, and his older brother, Paul's older brother, would play Made in Japan. He got this music on, and I was really into Purple, and he got this album, Made in Japan. Now, look at this, boys and girls, because the reissues aren't like this. Look at it. It looks, the shiny gold laminate of this album made it look special. It looked glamorous. It looked the business. It's a double album, gatefold sleeve, with the pictures of the band members. Richie Blackmore, probably my favourite photograph of Richie Blackmore of all time, that is. And this kind of done as like the Land of the Rising Sun, and each member just looks so exotic and so exciting. And the back cover, with this fantastic photos. The fact that photos are from a gig in London was irrelevant. And nowadays, people will have an issue with that, saying it wasn't authentic. But then, you imagine us, we need some live photos, get them from London. It's called Made in Japan. But the key thing when I was young was double album, and there were only 7 tracks on it. And most albums, there were 7 tracks on each side. But there was only 7, and even I got as I was getting to know Deep Purple, there were like 7 tracks on an album. They had like a routine. There was 4 tracks on one side and 3 on the other, but on this there was 7 on the whole thing. And this is different now for a lot of bands and for a lot of fans perhaps. But when I looked at this, and side 4 said Space Trucking. That was it. There was 1 track on it called Space Trucking. Well, I got Machine Head, and Space Trucking on Machine Head was about 4 or 5 minutes long. So what adventures awaited me for something that had been expanded to the whole side of a record? And also there was a track called Strange Kind of Woman. What the hell was that? Because I'd heard Fireball, and I'd heard all the albums up to this point, but that wasn't on it. But again, you see, the other thing to understand is this is pre-internet. It's, even though Strange Kind of Woman came out as a single in 1971, it's 1973. I've just discovered Purple the Christmas before. I didn't know any of this. So this was again an unknown track that was taking up half the side of a record. And the others, of course, I knew, but they were expanded. And again, trying to explain what it was like in the 70s for a lot of rock bands is that when you bought a live album or you went to see a live concert, whatever they did in the set, you expected it not to follow the formula of what you already knew. You expected it to be different, expanded, different solos. Whereas now, of course, people replicate the track and it's almost exactly the same length and everyone claps at the beginning and the end. But back then, you didn't really know what was going to happen. So what did I hear first? I obviously heard Highway Star, and great track. But one of the things, when you turn this up, and we used to turn this up, so you could, the crackling and the rumble from the needle hitting the vinyl, and you hear Gillan very softly say, "Okay, here we go." And then Lord does that little intro and everything starts to build. Everything starts to come forward. And it's kind of like as if everything's just kind of joining in one by one, as if lots of horses are starting to gallop and start to look in the same direction, and off they go. And Gillan says, "Okay, this one's called Highway Star, this one." And then Blackmore just hits an open chord and everything starts to come in. Now, Blackmore is a fantastic guitarist, and lots of people quite rightly say he's a very technical guitarist, and lots of YouTube videos of people copying his solos. But what you don't sometimes pick up on is he's quite a messy guitarist in places. There's a lot of risk involved in what he does, and a lot of people, I think, miss out on this. So that's what makes Deep Purple and Made in Japan such an exciting record, because it's dangerous, because you're not quite sure if it's going to work. And one of the things that you learn from listening to the Super Deluxe box set, as on the other nights, is that not only are the tracks different again, but it's only once they stop thinking about the microphones that they actually start to really let rip. And so on this album, as Blackmore plays this, the guitar on Highway Star, there's feedback, there's different squeaks and noises and slightly missed notes, and the way he hits the tremolo arm, you think, are those strings going to make it? How the hell does that guitar stay in tune? And it's just chaos. It's just organised chaos, and that's what makes it so exciting, because you're not quite sure if it's going to work, you're not quite sure what's going to happen next. And the solo on Highway Star and the live version is just definitive. And that way it ends up, and it's just a wild cacophony of noise, really. And it was fantastic to annoy your parents, which is harder to do nowadays because your parents are probably listening to Opeth. Child in Time, again, the screams on In Rock are dramatic and fantastic, but this, he goes straight from soft to boom. The best organised poetic screams of all time, followed by a guitar solo by Blackmore. The song by this time had reached its zenith, whereas before earlier versions there was keyboard solo, guitar solo, keyboard solo, guitar solo. Here it's just guitar, and Blackmore just goes with a flurry of notes that are interweaving with a rhythmic background that's just fantastic. And again, the ending is unique to this. Side 2, of course, has the greatest riff of all time, or the most famous riff of all time, and and it is the definitive version of Smoke on the Water. And what's interesting about this is saying about he always took chances. If you listen to the night before and the night after, he cocks up the riff on Smoke on the Water, so they had no choice but to use the one from the 16th of August because the others had got errors in them. So that again is interesting. There's a drum solo on this album, and most people in the years we are in now, 2021, this was when this video was made, for those of you finding it in years to come, people don't do drum solos really anymore. But the Mule is a musical drum solo. It's Ian Pace at his best and inventive, and it's musical. You can, as you listen to this drum solo, you can hear how it's been put together. It's not just what shall I hit next, or if you're watching it, it's more exciting because there's flash bombs going off. This was a very, very musical drum solo, and Ian Pace is a great fan of jazz, and all of that comes out in it. Side 3 was Strange Kind of Woman and Lazy. Strange Kind of Woman stretched out to a song that was way beyond the single. The guitar solos, the interplay between Ian Gillan and Blackmore as he tries to mimic the notes and does it really, really well. The solos on this are fantastic. And I'll talk about the Super Deluxe edition, but the version on the final night in Tokyo of Strange Kind of Woman far surpasses actually this version. Otherwise, I think they picked the right tracks. Lazy is fantastic. The other thing is the actual. You think about recording techniques. The band aren't being probably as they would do now. Everything's mic'd up properly. The guys are running across the stage. Sometimes they're in front of a different amp. They're in front of the speakers, and Martin Birch had to try and work all this out. How it sounds as good as it does is an absolute miracle, really. It's just it's just amazing. It's just amazing. And then side 4, of course, is Space Trucking. Now, I didn't know a lot about the early Purple, so I didn't know that Mandrake Root was one of the songs that was poured into it. I hadn't even heard Fireball at the time, so when Blackmore does his kind of stuff with the volume control on his guitar halfway through this, I didn't know that was from Fools. I just thought they were just making this stuff up as they went along. And how exciting it was. And that final few minutes when it just feels like they're just absolutely going for it, and the tremolo arms going bananas, and it's just incredible. And so, yes, in my personal Holy Trinity of Deep Purple albums, Come Taste the Band, Burn, and this. And I do think to this day, this record is so special to me. I bought this when I bought my own copy after going around to my friend's house. I saved up my pocket money, and I went down to no, it wasn't WH Smith's, it was Woolworths on the Coventry Road in Sheldon, just south of Birmingham near Solihull. And I went down after school, and it was £3.25. It was all my money. It was £3.25 for this. And I remember coming home and putting it on my dad's record player. He was horrified, by the way, once he heard it kick off. But I played it and played it and played it. I just did. And to this day, I'm not bored of it. It doesn't sound dated to me. It doesn't sound of its time. It captured Deep Purple Mark II in the perfect time. I understand Gillan doesn't like it because he's not happy with his performance, but he's got nothing to worry about. It was produced by Roger Glover and Ian Pace, and Roger Glover did the design. It's interesting that those two guys were the ones that looked after the sound, when you think, you know, Blackmore and Lord are the kind of the musical geniuses on this, and they just thought, yeah, whatever. But it was obviously, it was originally only meant for Japan, but once it started to spill out into the import racks, it was inevitable that it was going to happen. Anyway, that is made in Japan. And what I'm going to do next, for the next part of this video, which will be part 2, is I'm going to go through each one of these, and I'm also going to recommend which versions you could have. And finally, the thing that you probably don't realize is that when they did the big box and the 2 CD one and the new vinyl version, they didn't use the same mix with every single version. And, you know, so you've got 2 separate people did the mixes, and they do sound different. So who they are and what they did, I should talk about in part 2. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for all of your support. And I shall see you on my next video.